Hello.
Hello.
I'm Kimberly.
I'm Michael.
And today we are reviewing the movie Hitman.
Hitman by Richard Linklater. Great director of Before Sunset, Before Sunrise, Before Midnight, Boyhood. I can tell it's a Linklater movie immediately, because a lot of people probably aren't as big of fans as him as I am. He did a film called Tape.
Yes. Oh, that was another film he did. Okay, with Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman.
So he sort of does these Bender type movies where he will, but it's very dialogue heavy, and his writing is oftentimes very
Philosophical.
It's philosophical,
Psychological.
It's also sort of creates a dilemma that the characters have to overcome through these situations that they incur. And there's lots of dialogue.
Yeah.
And they get kind of engrossed or in a situation that is where they're in over their head.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with our hero, played by Glen Powell.
Great performance by Glen Powell. I thought he was really great. I love the tone of this movie, which was a very delicate tone because it was dealing with some dark subject matter, but it never felt heavy-handed. And the fascinating thing is it didn't feel dogmatic. It wasn't a film that was preachy, that told you what's right, what's wrong. It was very thought-provoking. So our main actor plays a teacher. He's a college professor of psychology. And then he picks up some side work working for the police as a... well, first he was just sort of like an assistant, like logistical guy. And then he got put into the position of a fake hitman.
Yes, they have this division where they do sting operations. And there's this one cop who's good at impersonating a hitman to basically entrap people that are trying to pay money to have people killed. So he starts basically going undercover as this sting impersonator.
Yeah, and at first,
hitman impersonator.
Yeah, and at first this character is portrayed as kind of nerdy, right? Not very confident.
A little overly nerdy.
Yeah, in a comical way. And I love this actor, and I love the makeup and hair artist because they made him look very different.
Depending on the character he's playing.
So we see him first as like this nerdy, kind of unsure guy who gets thrown in this position, and he's really nervous about being this fake hitman. He's like, oh, what if I get hurt? And the funny thing is I never thought about this before, but there aren't real hitmen out there. Like, you can't just hire a hitman. That only exists, like, in movies.
Craigslist.
Right? Craigslist. So, he poses as a fake hitman for people who actually try to attempt to hire a hitman. And then he tries to get them to confess in these little scenarios where they're supposed to meet. And spoiler alert, there's this funny dialogue where when the characters meet the hitman, the line is, "How's the pie?" And then he says what? All pie is good pie, or something like that, which is really funny because that line comes back later at the end.
I forgot that.
Or is the pie any good here? All pie is good pie, something like that. And so what's funny is we see him first as this nerdy guy, then he jumps into this role as hitman, and he's all nervous about it, and then suddenly, as soon as he is the hitman, he transforms into this completely different character. And this is based on a real story. It's based on a real individual who had this position and who was apparently really good at this position. And he did a lot of research before he would meet his clients and impersonate a hitman, because he would sort of alter his persona based on what he thinks the client would respond best to. So we get this like fun little montage of him playing all these different types of hitman characters, and it's really funny.
It's an interesting story about identity and what actually constitutes a person's identity, who they really are. The Jungian id, superego, and ego, and where those things land, and who he is, and how he sort of likes becoming these other people. The main one is Ron, so he's Gary in his real life as the teacher, kind of nerdy guy. Then he becomes Ron, who is the hitman who is assigned to this woman who is a attractive young woman who's being abused by her husband, and she's thinking about maybe killing her husband, and then he kind of talks her out of it during the sting operation.
So this is the scenario that changes the game for him. So he's doing really well at this new job. He's a great fake hitman. You know, he's saving all these lives. He's putting all these people that are trying to commit murder in prison. Juxtaposed with him leading these college lectures about the id, the ego, and psychology, and he poses these questions to his students. How deeply do you know yourself? There's also a scene at the beginning with his ex-girlfriend, which sort of establishes him as this kind of lame dude, right? Because she talks to him and she's like, you know, in order to feel like you want to murder your spouse or murder your significant other, you have to have a lot of passion. And they have this sort of interesting conversation, which illustrates the theme of the movie and how identity can change. And his ex-girlfriend says something very interesting about how this new study came about, how people can completely change their identity within certain circumstances where they're dialing a big part of themselves down and dialing another part of themselves up. And so I think the theme of identity and how adaptable we are as human beings is really interesting. It's a common thread throughout the movie. And so he meets this lady, right? Mm-hmm. And she's like, I want to murder my husband because he's abusive. But she doesn't seem like she's ready to go through with it. She's unsure of herself. And so instead of him trying to imprison her and get her to confess, get her to give him enough information so she can go to prison, he says, do yourself a favor, start a new life, get away from this guy. And so he convinces her to not go through with it because he cares about her, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, he gets teased by his colleagues. What are you, a life coach now? Yeah. And then he gives her his number, and she thinks he's Ron. She thinks he is a hitman. So she texts him, and she says, hey, you want to meet me at this, they have this funny dialogue about cats. And another funny thing is his dogs, he has 2 dogs, one named Id and one named Ego, which is pretty interesting. And anyway, so she invites him to meet her at this public event where there's going to be animals. And you hear his inner dialogue throughout the film, which, you know, sometimes people think that's hammy or hokey, but it really worked in this movie. I really like that part of this movie. And so long story short, they meet each other at this like little event, and then they have this flirtatious dialogue, and it's kind of corny, but it works. It's fun. And then they end up dating and hooking up, and no strings attached, and we're not going to reveal too much of each other on these agreements, you know, these terms of agreement where they're going to keep it casual. They're not going to reveal too much about each other's lives. And then, of course, the plot thickens, and it's just a really fun story. Parts of it feel like a romantic comedy, you know, parts of it feel like an action movie, a mystery suspense thriller, but it's not scary at all. You know, it's self-aware too, which is pretty cool. And I don't know, I just loved it. I loved all the thought-provoking dialogue and the questions it raises about morality and ethics. And it's designed in a way so you can really identify with these people. And the funny thing about his character at the end is, you know, he portrays himself as Ron to this girl that he's dating. And then he realizes that the girl's ex-boyfriend is trying to kill her because the girl's ex-boyfriend hires a hitman, which happens to be him, to try to kill her. So he warns her, your ex is trying to kill you. And then she actually shoots her crazy, abusive ex. So there's a lot of moral ambiguity there, but you could argue it was sort of self-defense, but still like premeditative self-defense. So he's trying to save her. And when he realizes she actually murders him, there's this funny scene where he's like breaks the character of Ron, and he's suddenly like, why would you do this? How could you kill him? And she's like, you do this all the time. And then he finally admits, I'm not really a hitman, okay? I'm a fake hitman. My name is Gary. And then she realizes, you've been lying to me? And so he goes away.
The film operates on several different levels. It's a rom-com. It's sort of a black comedy. It's very darkly like funny. There's this sort of ambiguous morality to the whole thing. We're dealing in a very... It's almost like... It kind of reminds me almost like getting into stuff like Dexter, if you ever have seen that show, or like American Psycho, or some of these things that are more kind of morbidly funny. And the main guy, Glenn Powell, is sort of playing this ambiguity with it by embodying these different people. And he's almost sort of, the Linklater and the writers are kind of saying to the audience that there really is no, like, there is no absolute morality. They talk about Descartes and these philosophers, divine law and different things that are like about, I think they even mentioned the harm principle, John Mill's harm principle, and these different things. And it's just very intriguing sort of exploration of these kind of the darker part of the human psyche. And also acting. There's scenes where it's layered. There's lots of times where he's lying with the truth, or doing something that he has to do because he has to put on a show for the cops, but he's also trying to communicate to someone else by lying while showing them messages on his phone, or having these layered conversations where they're kind of giving a performance while they're being recorded. Lots of stuff like that. It's really, really smart. And
it's really fun to watch. The acting is so great. Both actors.
It still falls into this total like formula of the main guy, the girl. The guy's lying to the girl finds out he's lying to her. I just didn't want to lose you. Get away from me. And then he's got to come back and redeem himself.
But the way that he comes back and redeems himself is unique. I've never seen anything quite like it. And I love this movie for its uniqueness.
It's the best like problem play movie structure I've seen.
And there's such a fun scene that you're talking about when he comes back and... you know, his whole team tells him, okay, you need to go in and talk to this girl and get her to confess because she's a prime suspect. So he walks in and she's realized he's actually Gary, but he holds up a phone so she can only see the text and they can't see the text. Everyone listening with his earpiece can just hear the audio. So it's brilliant because he says, they're listening, don't tell them we're dating, you still think I'm Ron. And so they have this like acting within, and it's really layered and fun.
But then of course there's bad guy. There's bad guy who knows what they're up to. Yeah. But the funny thing about the bad guy is actually a good guy. So there is the gray lines that this film wanders into.
Is he a good guy though? Yeah. Because he was basically trying to blackmail them into millions of dollars. So his character is ambiguous as far as is he good, is he bad? And then I love how Gary, our lead, basically starts to become like Ron, this guy he was playing, this fake hitman. So he sort of becomes Ron.
Sort of finds the blend.
Yeah, he becomes Ron at the end, and then at the very end, he finds this blend between Ron and Gary.
Ron's obviously his id.
Yeah.
And Gary is his ego.
Yeah.
Super ego is the ideal self.
Yeah.
When you can find that blend of the two, and it's a film about that.
Yeah.
And I think it's trying to say we shouldn't deny our darker side, our more animalistic, impulsive side. We shouldn't deny that, right? Mm-hmm. Like we shouldn't just exist in the logic, because that's no fun. Mm-hmm. So it's a fun movie.
Yeah, and it does have sort of like a happily ever after ending, but in a darkly funny way, because they realize they can't ever tell their kids the truth of how they met. So that's another example of what you were talking about. They're sort of acting within acting. And
it's I think it's really great. I think actually it'll be one of those that people will look back at and say, like, that's a really great movie years from now.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate it?
Give it a 9.
Yeah, I give it a 9 too. On a scale of 1 to 5, what would you rate it? I guess we should rate it 1 to 5. That's how people usually do it.
4.
Yeah, I give it a 4.5 actually. I mean, I can't think of anything about it that I didn't really like. Like, there's nothing about it I didn't like.
I give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Why not a 10?
4 out of 5.
Why not a 5 out of 5?
Because I reserve that for Shawshank Redemption.
I got you, yeah.
Or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, or films that are perfect.
Yeah, I didn't walk away feeling like inspired to live a better life after this, but I did walk away thinking, okay, that was fun.
Inception's a 10 out of 10.
And I kept thinking about I'm still thinking about the movie afterwards, like, you know, how can we define what's right, what's wrong? Is murder ever justifiable? Is because there's a whole scene where he's talking to his students about how perhaps studies suggest that our society has actually evolved from killing the people in our society that are, quote unquote, destructive. And so there's a scene that sort of suggests that maybe, you know, murder is justified in certain contexts, in self-defense, you know. And so it's, I don't know, it just makes you think. And I love movies that make you think.
Yeah, so. It's on Netflix right now. Check it out. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for watching.